I met him through a Craigslist personals ad. His posts weren't anything fancy, just kind of awkward and sweet, and it said something like, looking for someone to grab a drink with, laugh a little, and see where it goes. And it caught my attention because it felt real. And we started swapping emails, and he came off as funny and kind, maybe a little rough around the edges, but not really in a bad way. Then, after a week of chatting, we agreed to meet up in person. The bar was crowded, but we found a quiet corner to sit and talk, and right away, I noticed that he had this natural charm about him. He was funnier and way more engaging in person than I expected. He made me laugh, and the way he listened and responded made it feel like he'd be a great listener and maybe at some point in the future, a very attentive boyfriend. And as the night went on, he suggested heading to a nearby pool hall so we could continue enjoying one another's company. And I thought, why not? I had driven, so I offered to take him there. At the pool hall, we played a few games and the conversation kept flowing. He made me laugh, so much so that I almost forgot that we'd only just met. And then suddenly, his phone buzzed on the table and he looked at the screen and his face sort of dropped and then everything changed. "I need to tell you something," he said. And I froze, not really sure what was coming. "I'm a convicted felon, and I just got out of prison." And my mind started spinning. I didn't even have time to process that before he said, "And I have a girlfriend. I live with her, but it's not serious. I'm just staying there until I get back on my feet." And I was completely blindsided. This man who had been charming and funny all evening had just thrown all of this at me like it was no big deal. Then he added one more thing. "She just texted me. She walked into the bar earlier and saw us together, and she knows I'm with you." In that moment, I knew the date was over. I wanted to get out of there, but I'd driven us, and I didn't feel right just leaving him stranded. I told him that I'd take him back to his car, but the vibe on the drive was completely tense and uncomfortable. And as we drove, the alcohol must have really hit him because he started crying. Just quiet tears at first, but then it turned into full-on sobbing. He kept apologizing over and over, saying how much he regretted everything, and I didn't know what to say. And then out of nowhere, he reached for the car door handle. And a panic rose up inside of me, and I yelled, "We're on the goddamn highway!" And he didn't seem to care. He was crying so hard, and it was like he wasn't even hearing me. And I hit the child locks as fast as I could. I yelled at him, trying to stay calm, but inside I was terrified. I didn't know what he was going to do next. The rest of the drive felt like it took forever, and he kept mumbling and crying, and I just focused on getting us back to the bar as fast as possible. When we finally got there, I let him out and watched him stumble to his car, and as soon as he was out of sight, I just drove away as fast as I could. I thought that was the end of it, but a few days later I got a message from an unknown number. It was his girlfriend, and my stomach dropped. She sent pictures of her face, bruised and swollen with a split lip, and she told me he'd beaten her up after our date. She'd confronted him about seeing me, and that's how he reacted, and I felt sick. This man who had made me laugh and seemed so sweet at first was a violent monster. I couldn't believe that I'd spent an entire evening with him, laughing and having fun, all while being completely unaware of what he was capable of. His soon-to-be ex-girlfriend and I started talking more and more after that, and she told me all about the things he'd done to her, and it was horrifying. Then not long after, she left him for good, and we actually became friends. It's strange how something so terrible can lead to something good, but I guess that's life. And that night changed me. I learned to trust my gut and pay attention to those red flags. If something feels off, it probably is. And looking back, I can't believe how close I came to being another one of his victims, and it serves as a reminder to be careful and to never underestimate what someone is capable of.
When I was younger, I used to work at a sporting goods store for a while. I played sports growing up, and I always liked them, so I figured it would be a cool place to work. And it was, I was familiar with most of the things that we sold in the store, and I also got a good discount. When I worked, I would do a little bit of everything. Sometimes I would be a cashier, and other times I would stock shelves and stuff. Our store also never really seemed to get that busy, except for some weekends and things like that. So one time I was working and I was out in the store, mostly restocking shelves and things like that. I had moved all around the store, and by this time I was in the far left side of the store in one of the aisles. These were the aisles where a lot of sports equipment was. The store was not really that busy, just a few customers were around here and there shopping, and I think it was me and 3 other coworkers. So as I was over there, out of nowhere I saw this baseball come rolling into my aisle. Obviously we sold baseballs, but I didn't know why one would be rolling towards me. I went over and I picked it up. That's when I saw another baseball come flying in my direction. It missed me and hit one of the shelves in the aisle that I was in. I realized that somebody had thrown the ball in my direction. I looked around but couldn't tell who had done it. They must have hidden or something. I called out asking who did that, but nobody answered me. I then went back into my aisle, hoping that it was just a one-time thing. Well, it wasn't. Not even 30 seconds later, another ball came whizzing into the aisle, also hitting a shelf, and thankfully not hitting me. This was dangerous, and I felt like I had to stop whoever was doing this, so I walked back out of the aisle and looked around again. I started walking around the nearby area and looking all over the place, but I couldn't find anyone. Eventually, I saw a customer, but it was an older lady, and I didn't really think that she had done it. But I did ask her if she had seen anybody with baseballs or anything. She said no, though. I went over to the baseballs, and nobody was in that aisle. So after that, I went up to the front of the store, and I told my coworkers about it. None of them had seen the guy or anything, so I asked them to be aware if they saw somebody with baseballs or something. Then I went back to work in the same aisle that I had been. When I was walking over there, though, I thought that I saw the guy. After passing by the baseballs again, I saw a younger man holding a baseball in his hand. I could not confirm that this was the guy, but it seemed like too much of a coincidence to me. He looked at me when I passed him, and then he turned in the other direction and started walking away. I almost said something, but I didn't. I couldn't prove that he was the guy, and he was now walking off, so I just kept going as well. When I got to the aisle again where I'd been working, I continued with my work like before. For about 5 minutes or so, things were fine. Then, out of nowhere, I heard somebody approaching. I looked to the end of the aisle. I saw the same man come around the corner, except now he was wearing football shoulder pads as well as a football helmet. He had clearly just gotten both from our football aisle, which was nearby. Then the man started sprinting, literally charging straight for me. I braced myself for the impact, and the man ran right into me, knocking me over. I heard him start laughing a little, and then he ran out of the aisle. I quickly got to my feet and then left the aisle to go after the man. I was furious now, and I knew that this was a big problem. The man continued running and turned down one of the main aisles. I chased after him, and he actually ran pretty fast. Soon he was heading towards the front part of the store. I continued behind him, and we reached the checkout area where my coworkers were. The man ran right past all of them, and then right out of the doors, leaving the store entirely. My coworkers were looking around, not really sure what they had just seen. The guy ran through the parking lot and then off the property and out of sight. He was still wearing the helmet and pads which he didn't pay for, so he had basically stolen them. We called the police and they came out and did a report of the guy. They said they would look around for him. After that, I never heard anything more though, and I never saw the guy again. I'm not really sure why he did that, but that was by far the craziest thing to ever happen while I worked there. This is something that happened back when I was a freshman in high school. I'm also a female, and this was about 10 years ago now. So the story begins when I got this friend request from a random guy on Facebook. I looked at his profile and saw that he appeared to be around my age, and we did have a couple of mutual friends. His profile said he went to a different high school, but it was one that was nearby in just the next city over from mine. I accepted the friend request because of this, and I was also slightly curious of how the guy knew about me. For the most part, he looked like a pretty typical kid though. Not long after I accepted his friend request, he sent me a message saying hi. I said hi back to him, and we started having a basic conversation. I don't recall everything said, but the conversation continued into the next day. I remember that's when he asked me if I wanted to hang out with him. Now, I had only just met him and we went to different schools. He seemed nice to that point from talking, and I almost said yes, but then I ended up saying no at that point because I just didn't know him well enough yet. He said maybe some other time, and I said yes to that, but not making any official plans. For the rest of that day and into the next, we continued to talk on and off. Well, the next day, later on, after I got home from school, he told me that he was going to come to my house and pick me up. Once more, I did not feel comfortable to hang out with the guy yet. I told him that I would not be able to, but he didn't respond to me for a while. About 20 minutes later or so, he told me to come outside, saying that he was there. I got a bad feeling about it, and also realized now that this guy must be at least 16 years old if he was driving around. I walked over to the front of the house and saw that there was a car parked out on the side of the street. It was a red 4-door sedan that was kind of old looking. However, the windows were rather tinted and I could not see inside. I was really surprised that he had driven all the way to my house. At first, I felt kind of bad for him to drive all that way and not hang out with him. We had been talking for a few days and most likely he wouldn't be a bad guy, so I almost walked outside and got into his car. But my parents were also home, and I would have to tell them where I was going, and I didn't think they would want me to go with this guy. After thinking about it for a minute or two, I decided not to go. When I said maybe we'd hang out another time, I didn't mean just drive to my house. He texted me on Facebook a couple more times, urging me to go outside already. I told him that I had some other place to go though, which wasn't true, but I didn't know what else to say. Eventually, he said okay, and he drove off. After he left though, I got the realization that I never told him my address. It sort of creeped me out that he knew where I lived. I didn't know how he would know this. We did have mutual friends on Facebook, so possibly he knew one of my friends and asked them. Either way, I was much less comfortable even talking with this guy anymore. However, despite that very same night he continued to send me messages. I remember that this was several hours later, probably 9 or 10 at night. He asked me where I was and what I was doing. I told him that I was just in my room doing homework, which I was. After that, he did not respond right away. I don't remember what assignment I was doing, but I was pretty focused on it. I sat at my desk in the corner of my bedroom. About 20 minutes later though, I heard this car driving down the street slowly outside. My bedroom was at the front end of the house, and I could see out to the street. We also lived in a pretty quiet neighborhood, and at this hour, it was rare for somebody to drive past. So hearing a car driving slowly just got my attention for some reason. I remember lifting up the blinds and glancing out the window. When I did, I saw this car moving very slowly and sort of pulling over to the side of the street, across from our house and a little ways down. That's when I realized this was the same red car with the tinted windows. I looked back to Facebook, but there were still no new messages. He hadn't told me that he was coming over again, and he didn't tell me to come outside either. I was expecting him to tell me again that he was there and to go with him like before, but he didn't. As the car continued to just sit there outside on the side of the street running, I kept an eye on it. After several more minutes, the driver's door opened. I saw a man get out, but it wasn't some 16-year-old kid. It was a grown man, probably like 40. He got out and started walking in the direction of our house. At this point, I quickly got up and ran out of my bedroom. I went towards the living room, and luckily my parents were both still up and in the living room. I didn't have time to tell them the whole story, but I alerted them of the guy walking. My dad got up and went over to the door. I looked through the front window, and by now the man was walking on the side of the street towards our house. My dad went over to the front door and opened it. When he did, the man kept walking farther away down the street, in the opposite direction of his car. My dad actually went outside and followed the guy, calling for him to stop. But at that point, the guy took off running. My dad did not run after him and came back inside. That's when I told my parents the whole story of how I thought I was talking to a kid my age, and also how he just showed up without me giving him my address. My parents called the police at that point, and my dad went and stood outside in the front door, seeing if the guy would head back for his car because it was still there. When the police arrived, the man was still nowhere in sight. They spoke with us, and then went out and looked for the man. He had to show up eventually because of his car, and when he did, the police got him. After that, I learned a valuable lesson about Facebook and social media. I was much more careful with who I talked to online for the rest of my high school career.
I stumbled across the link on a Craigslist psych discussion forum. I wasn't looking for anything specific, just killing time scrolling through threads on lucid dreaming and conspiracies about subliminal messaging. And then I saw the post. Live feed, smiling man, watch if you dare. It had a single link, no description, and a sense of weirdness that kind of pulled me in, and against my better judgment, I clicked on it. The stream loaded quickly, revealing a man sitting in a plain wooden chair in the middle of an empty room, and the lighting was flat and harsh, giving the whole scene a very clinical vibe. He was staring directly at the camera, unblinking, with the kind of smile you'd expect from someone trying too hard in a family photo. It wasn't quite unsettling at first, it was just kind of strange, and I waited for him to do something. A wave, a twitch, a shift in his seat, anything. But he didn't. He just sat there, his wide eyes locked on the lens, his lips frozen in that eerie grin, and I checked the timestamp. It was live. I remember thinking, well, this is weird, while glancing at the chat window. It was empty, no viewers except for me, and curiosity kept me from watching. Now 5 minutes turned into 10, and then 20. He didn't move once. No blinking, no fidgeting, nothing. It was like he was frozen in time except for the faint rise and fall of his chest. The longer I stared, the more unnatural it felt, as if he were daring me to keep looking. And then suddenly, I heard a noise. At first I thought it was my imagination, but it grew louder, a faint creak like footsteps on old wood. But the man didn't react. The sound got louder, footsteps echoing faintly in the stream, coming from somewhere out of view. A shadow flickered across the far wall of the room and my stomach tightened. Someone was there. Someone else. I leaned closer to the screen and my pulse was quickening. A figure appeared, blurry at first, and then cleared as they moved cautiously into the frame. It was a man, dressed in dark clothes, wearing a ski mask, and he was holding a sledgehammer. The intruder didn't seem to notice the live camera at first. He glanced around the room, gripping the hammer tightly, and then froze when his eyes landed on the smiling man. But that man, he didn't move an inch. His grin didn't falter and his gaze didn't shift. The intruder hesitated, his posture stiffening. He took a step closer, waved a hand in front of the smiling man's face. Nothing. And then he whispered something, low enough that I couldn't make it out. The smiling man stayed silent, and he didn't even blink. The intruder backed away slowly, muttering to himself, and then turned and bolted out of the frame. I heard the sound of a door slamming shut somewhere off-screen, and for a moment the room was quiet again, except for the faint hum of the camera. The man didn't so much as flinch. I closed the tab, but the image of his frozen, smiling face stayed with me long after. I never went back to that stream, but sometimes I wonder how many people have found it since, and who's really watching who.
Back in the day, I used to work at Sears. This is when they were doing really well and had tons of stores. If anybody doesn't remember Sears, they were a large department store that sold many things like appliances and clothes. It's mostly gone out of business in recent years though. But when I worked there, we would get lots of people in the store. Well, one time I was working a long day in December. With it being around Christmas time, there were lots of people shopping for gifts and stuff. It was also a weekend, so that added to it. I worked basically all day, and I saw countless people. When I was finally off of work, I was happy to go home and was tired. So I just remember that I clocked out of work and then left the store. I went out to my car and then drove back home. It took maybe 15 minutes or so to get back. Then I parked my car in the driveway and got out of it. However, as I was walking up to my front door, I heard a car coming down the street, which was usually very quiet. I noticed it but didn't really think that much of it at all, and I kept going. However, as I was opening my door to go inside, I happened to hear the car slowing down. I looked over to see that the car was starting to pull over to the side of the street in front of my house. So I stopped and I kept watching it because I wanted to see what this car was doing. I did not recognize the car as a neighbor or anybody that I knew. The car pulled over and came to a stop just in front of my mailbox. Then the driver's window rolled down a little, and I saw somebody open up my mailbox and then put something inside of it. I couldn't really tell who the person was from where I was. I think it was a man, but I'm not 100% sure. Anyways, I didn't really know what this person was doing or what they had put in my mailbox. After that, they rolled their window back up and then they drove away. I went back outside, and after seeing that the car was out of my sight, I walked down to my mailbox. I opened it and I looked inside to see an unmarked envelope. I brought it inside. When I opened up the envelope, there were several Polaroid pictures in it. They were all pictures of me. The first were me working at Sears earlier that day when I was at the registers working as a cashier. I had not known that any of these photos were taken. They were taken at a distance too, so it was not obvious to me and I never noticed it. There was then a photo of me walking in the store, I think when I went on my break. And the last photo was of me walking out to my car in the parking lot after work. This was clearly taken from inside of a car that was also in the parking lot. I hadn't noticed any of them. Of course, I was very freaked out by this. I didn't know what to do about it or anything. I didn't go to the police or report it, but I did tell my friends as well as coworkers. They were all just as confused as I was. The rest of my time working at Sears, I didn't notice anything else like that, and I never saw that car at my house again. I'm not sure where the pictures are. I think I still have them somewhere, but I couldn't find them. It's been so long. But I'd still like to know why that person did that. Was it just an elaborate prank? Why would they choose me though? And they must have followed me home without me noticing. It's all very strange. Last year, I went to a Christmas party with some friends. I have a pretty large friend group that I've had for years. Most of us live in the same general area, and Jim and Vanessa, who recently got married, live in a really nice apartment building. They're part of the friend group, and they decided to host the Christmas party last year in the recreation room of their apartment building. You can rent out the room, and it's very nice and also large. There's a kitchen and dining room and stuff, so it's popular for parties of all kinds. So I went to the party, and there was probably 30 to 40 people that wound up coming. So many that I didn't even know all of them that well, but I at least recognized everybody, and most of them I did know very well. We talked, had food, drank, and had a very good time. I remember though, there was this one woman who I did not recognize at all. She was the only person at the party where I had no idea who she was. I thought maybe she was somebody's girlfriend who had just recently started dating or something, but she didn't really seem to be with anyone. I would see her on and off during the party. I never got around to saying hi to her or having a conversation and asking who she was or anything though. Eventually, people started to leave the party. I would say that there were maybe 15 or 20 people still there when I left, so a good amount. When I was leaving, I remember noticing the woman sitting by herself, sort of in the corner of the room. After I left, I walked out of the apartment and to my car. Then I started to drive back to my own apartment, which was like 10 minutes away. Well, the strangest thing happened. That very same woman ended up following me home. I hadn't noticed anything at all until I pulled up to a red light and was like maybe 2 minutes from my place. When I stopped, I just casually looked in my mirror at the car behind me. I saw that in the driver's seat it looked like the same woman. I didn't know what to make of this, but from that point on, I paid attention to her driving. She made all the same turns as me. It was very confusing. Soon, she was turning into my apartment complex along with me. I was pretty confident that she did not live in my building or anything. I had never seen her at all before. So I drove around the parking lot with her still behind me. I parked my car in the space that I usually did. The woman drove a little ways past, and then I saw her parking in an open space a ways away. I got out of my car and started walking for the door. I heard a car door open and close and glanced over to see the woman then walking in my direction. I went faster, and I made it inside a good time before she would reach the door. After getting in, I went up a flight of stairs and then looked out of a window outside. The woman was standing near the door, indicating that she did not have a key to get in. Then I went to my apartment. I texted a few friends about it, and I put in the group chat asking who the woman was. Well, nobody had any idea. Everybody just kind of assumed that someone else knew her. But it turns out not a single person at the party knew who she was, and then she ended up following me home. After that, I haven't seen her since. The next time I left my apartment, she was gone, and so was her car. I'm still very confused about it. I live in a quiet neighborhood with my wife. Our community has a group page on Facebook that many residents are in. The page is used to post any news in the community, and anybody can post there. Sometimes people will post things like animals seen in their backyards, or that they're having a yard sale. Other times, things like community events are posted there, or possibly pictures of the weather. But every now and then, if suspicious activity or crimes happen, that's where people post about it. However, that's been pretty rare, because our area has always been considered to be pretty safe. In the years that I've been a part of the Facebook group, the craziest crimes I remember was when a police chase cut through the town once, or another time somebody's garage got broken into. Well, one morning I went onto the Facebook page and saw a post that was concerning. It was talking about some possible carjacking attempts and suspicious characters seen near the golf course. When I read the post, it talked of a man who lurked on the side of a certain street next to the woods. The man apparently walked out in front of somebody's car once and tried pulling open the door and then tried breaking the window. The driver was able to get away and called the police. However, when they got there, they did not find the man. Another time, less than a week later, a man was seen in that same general spot, just looking at people standing by the side of the road, and then he went into the woods. He was described as having longer brown hair and a short beard. This was especially concerning to me because our backyard is very large and goes all the way to that very same spot, so technically the guy would have been standing on my property. So the woods that he had come out of was our woods. You see, we have 5 acres, and most of the woods is going directly back behind our house. There's so much of it that we never really go far into them. I rarely go to that part of my property, and the end of the woods is the street that the people were talking about, and right across from that street is a golf course. When I heard about this, I decided to go out into the woods and look around. I hadn't been back there in a while. We have a small path through the first part of the woods, but I would say at least 90% of it is all wildland that I rarely walk through. I went out into the woods and it soon became pretty dense. After wandering around there for like 30 minutes, I hadn't seen or heard anything strange, so I went back inside after that. We were not sure why a man would be hanging out in that area, and we didn't know who it could possibly be either. Well, that very same night, my wife and I were at home. I was in the living room watching TV with my wife, and she got up to get something in the kitchen. It was probably like 10 p.m. or so. Most of our lights were off, and when my wife got into the kitchen, I remember her announcing that something triggered the light in the backyard. We have a motion detecting light in the backyard for the smaller area that's not the woods, which is a grass area and our patio. Both of us assumed it to be an animal, most likely a deer. So I got up and headed into the kitchen to see what it could be. However, we did not see anything for several moments. That is, until we saw a man walking out of the woods and into our yard. I knew right then and there that this had to be the same guy that people had been talking about. We watched from our window as the guy walked around our yard. I thought about opening a window and yelling at him, but I didn't. We moved back as the man walked closer to our house. We didn't really think he could see us because our lights back there were off, but I wasn't sure. That's when I got out my phone and dialed 911. The guy then walked over to our back door and tried opening it. Thankfully, it was locked. He then walked back out into the yard and eventually over to our shed in the corner of the backyard. Then he went inside of it. I told police that the man was hiding inside of our shed. They did not take long to respond and got there just minutes later. They went to the shed and tried to get the man to come out for a while. There were several things in there that he could use as a weapon. After probably almost 20 minutes, eventually they got the guy to come out of the shed. I learned that just a little bit before we had seen him in our backyard, he had tried to carjack somebody else on that same road before taking off into the woods. The police were already called about that incident. That must have been why they got there so fast, and that also must have been why he was trying to get inside of our house and then hid inside of the shed. I'm glad that my wife noticed the light coming on and that we saw him. If not, he maybe could have gotten away with it. Looking back, it makes me wonder if the guy had been living in our woods for a while or something. I'm not sure why he chose that spot, but he had been seen there multiple times. It was very creepy. At one point in time, I used to work at a clothing store in a mall. It was a smaller store and not that big, but I liked working there. The mall was nice and I lived pretty close by. The events I'm going to tell you about took place one time when I was working alone. The store stayed quiet for much of the day. We got a few shoppers here and there, but there was a good amount of time where I was by myself. I remember at one point a man coming into the store and looking around for quite a while. However, he did not buy anything and he eventually left. That was sometime in the afternoon. Hours went by and we got a few more people here and there. Eventually, it was closing time and it was my job to close the doors, lock them, and do some other things before leaving. I had closed many times before and I had a routine that I would do. Nobody was in the store, so when I closed, I locked the doors and then I started cleaning a little bit inside. I was not going to be there for too long, but just a few minutes. In the time that I was cleaning, I heard someone trying to open the doors. The doors to the store were glass and completely clear, so you could see right through them. When I looked over, I saw a man there. It was the same guy who had walked around the store for a while earlier but didn't buy anything. I took a few steps over to the door and said that we were closed. The man did not say anything back to me, but he tried opening the doors yet again. After telling him loudly again that we were closed, I started to go back to what I was doing. When I did, I happened to notice that the man was now finally walking away. So I figured that he was gone for good after that. As I kept working though, a few minutes went by. Then, out of nowhere, I heard this really loud noise. It came from the front end of the store. Then, I heard another loud noise. I looked over and I saw the same man hitting the glass of the door with something. Within its third or fourth hit, the glass started to break. I was really surprised at what was happening, obviously. And at that point, I knew that I needed to get out of there. But those were the only doors. So instead, I headed to the back of the store where we had a very small back room area. I went inside of it and quickly shut the door and locked it behind me. Meanwhile, as I did this, I heard more glass breaking, and the man was soon able to get inside of the store. I really had no idea why he was doing this, but I knew that I had to call the police, so I took out my cell phone and dialed 911. I asked for police and told them what was happening. I stayed there in the back room trying to otherwise be quiet. I did feel relatively safe back there, until several minutes after I had been in the back room, I heard the man trying to open the door. Then he loudly banged on it several times. After that, he seemed to walk elsewhere in the store. The man was inside of the store for what felt like forever. Soon though, things became quiet. I couldn't really tell at first where the man was because I couldn't hear everything that well anyways. But after a while longer, I still didn't hear anything. The next thing that I heard in the store was the police. I came out and talked to them. Apparently, the guy had left. I saw that the store was messed up and broken glass was everywhere near the front. The man ended up being tracked down though on the other side of the mall. I really don't know why he did it. I think he might have been on drugs or something. I'm really glad that we had a back room at the store though and that I was able to go in it. Several years ago, I got this apartment in the city. It was a 1-bedroom, 1-bathroom place. I lived on the second floor and towards the end of the hallway. When I moved in, I never really saw any of the neighbors in the building and it was mostly quiet. Well, one day after living there for about a month, I got a friend request on Facebook from a seemingly random guy. I did not recognize him or know who he was, and we did not have any mutual friends, so I declined his friend request. The next day, he sent me another friend request, this time with a message telling me that he was my next door neighbor. I accepted the request this time, not knowing who he was. I told him that I didn't know that and I had never seen him. He said something like that was fine. So I remember that after that, I was a little bit confused as to how he had found me, because I had literally never seen this guy at all, and I didn't know how he would know my name and find me on Facebook. But overall, I didn't really give that much thought to it. As the next few weeks went by, I never saw the guy out in the hallways or anything, but he occasionally would message me on Facebook. He would randomly ask me what I was doing, or he would ask me how my job was, things like that. At first, I thought he was just a nice or friendly guy, but eventually it seemed a little weird. I think it was just because of how random the times when he would message me were, and his replies were also a little bit strange, and he would ask me questions like he had known me for years, and mention things that I didn't know how he knew. Like one time, I went home to my parents for the weekend. Later on, when I was back, he asked me if I had gone to my parents. I really didn't know how he knew that. He told me that he just guessed, but it seemed weird. One night, though, things took a really crazy turn. It was really late, and I was just going to bed. At probably 11 p.m., I saw that he sent me a message. It said, "What are you doing?" I was tired and did not bother to open it or respond. Instead, I just got ready for bed and then went to sleep. But as I was trying to fall asleep, I heard my phone vibrating several more times from notifications. I got curious and I looked at it to see several more messages from my neighbor. He was saying things like, "I know you're home," and "I need you to answer me now." He always seemed kind of strange, but never texted like this before. I responded asking if he was okay and what was going on. He told me that he wanted to come over, and I said that I was really tired and I was going to sleep. I asked him if anything was wrong, and he said no, he just wanted to come over. I told him no, I was busy, and then I put my phone down. But he kept sending me more and more messages. I turned my notifications off, knowing that he was just going to keep sending me stuff. Then I ignored it and I went to bed. However, not long after this, I woke up to the sound of banging on my door. It was my neighbor, and I saw on Facebook that he sent me at least 20 more messages demanding to be let in. He was loudly knocking on the door and trying to open it. I went over to the door and yelled from the other side that if he didn't leave, I was going to call the cops. He still didn't leave though. Instead, he just demanded that I let him in. So I called 911 and told them what was happening. The man stayed at my door and continued knocking and asking me to let him in. I obviously did not. When the police arrived, he was still there. I heard him arguing with police, and eventually he tried fighting one of the cops and got arrested. I'm pretty sure that the guy was crazy or else on drugs. I don't know why he acted like that, but I'm glad that I didn't open the door for him or anything.
Way back before I moved out of my parents' place, my little cousin spilled Mountain Dew all over my PlayStation and just totally fried the thing. A few hours later, I was scrolling my local Craigslist when, bingo, I see a PS3 for sale for $100. The post said it was in good condition, and the seller claimed that he needed the money urgently. It seemed too good to be true, but since it was the holidays and everywhere was mostly snowed in, I was bored out of my mind and I was desperate. I texted the number listed, and the seller replied quickly, suggesting that we meet in the parking lot of a closed-down Kmart on the edge of town. He insisted on cash and stressed the need for a quick transaction because he didn't want to be sitting in his car freezing his butt off. I felt uneasy. I told myself that I'd be careful. As long as I saw the PlayStation 3 before handing over the money, I figured I'd be fine. When I pulled into the lot, it was completely empty, aside from the dark car parked at the far end, and a man in a hoodie leaned against the driver's door. He raised a hand in acknowledgement as I approached, and then asked if I had the cash. His tone was casual, almost bored, so it didn't raise any red flags at all for me. I nodded, and then he motioned toward the backseat of his car, saying the PlayStation 3 was there and inviting me to check it out. I stepped out of my car, walked towards his, and then opened the back door. Inside was a box, but something was off. It wasn't sealed, and when I lifted the lid, it wasn't a PlayStation 3. Instead, it was an old, dusty console that looked like it hadn't worked in years. And before I could react, I sensed the guy stepping closer behind me. Then out of nowhere, he pulls a gun from his waistband and tells me to hand over the cash, or I'm dead. The whole time his voice was low and controlled, and he didn't sound remotely nervous. But I felt like I was about to piss my pants as I reached for the envelope in my pocket. As I turned to hand it over, I caught sight of another person in the driver's seat of his car, crouched low and watching very intently. This wasn't just a bad deal. It was a straight-up setup. And when that hit me, it hit me like a punch in the face. I had this gut feeling that they weren't about to let me leave and that the guy's next command was going to be for me to get into his car. Instead of just handing over the money and staying put, I tossed the envelope into the car, then instinctually just bailed. I threw the cash in the hopes they'd be happy with their $100, but then, looking back on it, Who robs someone for just $100? They didn't want the money. They wanted me. And from what they did next, I'm not sure if they cared if I was dead or alive. The first gunshot cracked the air behind me, and then the asphalt kicked up near my feet. I didn't waste a second. I dove from my car, fumbling with my door handle until a second shot followed, louder and sharper and shattering my rear window. I finally got the door closed, started the engine, and then just stomped on the gas, tires screeching as I peeled out of the parking lot as fast as I could. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely hold the wheel. When I finally made it home, I locked all the doors and sat in the dark for hours, trying to shake off the shock. The shattered glass in my back seat was a grim reminder of just how close I'd come to something far worse, a near miss that could have ended much differently.
I used to work at a store called Marshall's. It's a store that sells clothes and a few other things. The store is pretty big and there's a lot of things inside of it. One time I was working at the customer service desk towards the back of the store. I had been working there for most of the day. By now though, it was nighttime and things had quieted down significantly. There was just one other person working with me at that point, and she was at the registers working as a cashier. We closed in probably like 15 minutes or so. I remember that I started to hear these strange noises. The first sounded like a really creepy laughter. It was very strange, and I didn't know where it was coming from other than that it was in front of me somewhere. That's where tons of racks of clothes and stuff were. I ignored it for the most part. Then I heard the sound of somebody seemingly breathing very slow and deliberate. I looked around but still didn't see anyone. Sometime later, I heard the creepy laughter again. I was so confused. By now though, we closed in just a couple of minutes. I got up and walked over towards where I was hearing the noises. Nobody was there. There had already been announcements over the store speakers that we were closing, and as far as I was aware, whoever was doing this was the only person who was still inside of the store. Other than that, all the customers were gone. After not being able to find anybody and not seeing anything else, I returned to my desk. But just moments later, I heard the sound again. I got up and again quickly walked over. There was still nobody there. I was so confused and thought that I was going crazy. I kept looking around to where I was sure the sounds were coming from. Then, I don't know how, but I realized something. I looked on the shelf above a rack of clothing. There was a sweater that was not folded neatly and just kind of tossed on top. I picked it up and it revealed that there was a speaker underneath. It was like one of those Bluetooth speakers that people can use to connect to their phone. I realized that's what was going on. Somebody was playing these sounds from their phone to the speaker and they had planted it there. Why they did this, I did not know, and where the person was, I also did not know. The store was literally closing now, and they still had their speaker in the store. I took the speaker and walked up to the front end of the store to show my coworker. She was now locking up the doors, and after I showed it to her, we talked for a couple of minutes. The speaker hadn't made any kind of sound since I had found it. I thought that maybe the person was playing the sounds from outside, but ultimately that just didn't seem realistic. The Bluetooth range probably would not work that well from outside. We realized that somebody may be hiding inside of the store. The two of us then started walking around and calling out, asking if anybody was there. Like I said, the store is kind of large, so there were possible hiding places that this person could be. After a few minutes of searching, we had not found anyone. Then I remember hearing a noise, like somebody was walking towards the front of the store. Both of us looked over at the same time. We both saw a man walking out of the doors and leaving. Neither of us got a good look at him, but this had to be the guy. After he left, we went over and looked. We saw him walking through part of the parking lot far away, and then he went out of sight. Somehow he had evaded us, and then he left the store. I was glad that he was gone, but the whole thing still creeps me out. Every year on Christmas Day, we usually host family over at our house. We have a decent-sized place, and most of the family lives nearby. I live here with my wife, and a few years ago we were hosting Christmas like usual. So family members started coming over at around 12 o'clock, and they were mostly parking on the side of the street out front. Our neighborhood is pretty quiet, but not super isolated or anything. When pretty much everyone had gotten there, I remember that somebody told me that there was a random car in the driveway. I walked over to a front window and I saw this large SUV with really tinted windows just sitting in the driveway. Apparently, it had just recently got there but hadn't left. Nobody had gotten out of it either. I looked at it and wondered who was driving because I had never seen the car before. Nobody was getting out and it wasn't leaving, so I decided to go out and ask. I thought that maybe it was somebody who was lost trying to get to a neighbor's house. That was the most logical explanation in my mind. So I opened up the front door and I walked outside. However, as soon as I stepped out into the front yard, the car, which was already running, started suddenly backing up. I was not able to reach it, and the car quickly left the driveway and then drove off down the street pretty quickly. It seemed weird, but at least they were gone now. After that, I went back inside. Over the next few hours, I talked with lots of family, and soon we had our Christmas dinner. Some of us were going to take a walk around the neighborhood after, because even though there was some snow on the ground, it was a nice day and rather warm. When I got near the front door though, I was shocked to see the same SUV parked in the driveway again. I opened the door once more to go outside. When I did, once again, whoever it was backed out and then quickly drove away. This was very strange. I remember noticing also just how tinted the windows were. It was like I couldn't see anything inside, so I had obviously no idea who was driving or anything. Well, we ended up taking a walk around the neighborhood. I didn't see the car at all, and nobody else did either. We went back in after that, and everybody hung out some more. That night, people started to leave at probably around 7 or 8. By 9 o'clock, everyone was gone, and it was just me and my wife at home. Well, we were in the living room watching a movie, and my wife got up to go get something from the kitchen. However, on her way back, she went to the front of the house and passed by a window. I heard her mention that the car was there again. I walked over to the front of the house and looked outside. Once more, that same SUV was sitting in the driveway. I really couldn't believe it. We both stood there near the front door and watched it. The car was running, but nobody got out or anything. We watched it for at least 10 minutes. It was crazy. Then I had enough and I went to leave again. This time, as soon as I opened the front door, I took off and I sprinted for the SUV. However, like every other time, the car quickly backed up and then drove away. I was unable to catch up to it. I then went back inside after that. My wife and I were both very confused. For the rest of the night though, the car didn't come back, and I haven't seen the SUV since. I'm hoping that I never see it again. I still wonder about it though. Something really weird happened a couple of years ago. I went on Facebook one day to see that I had a new message from a woman. I did not know this woman, but apparently I was friends with her. I had quite a few Facebook friends though, because I had my account for over 10 years. There's a good number of people that I don't exactly remember how or when I became friends with them. So anyways, this woman messaged me saying hi, and when I said hi back to her, she started a conversation. It seemed pretty random, so not long into the conversation, I asked her how exactly we knew each other again. She just replied saying school. Now, I did not remember her from any school that I had gone to. I just said okay, and then she continued to talk to me. She asked me where I lived, and I stupidly told her the city that I lived in. She said that she lived not that far away. Well, the conversation sort of dried up a while after that, so we stopped talking to each other. Overall, it was kind of weird, but not a huge deal one way or another. But something else happened. That very same night, I was in the living room pretty late. I lived alone during this time in a duplex house. At about 11 o'clock, I remember hearing this sudden knock at my front door. Obviously, I wasn't expecting anybody, and I really had no idea who it could be. I walked over to the window and looked out, but when I did, I was very surprised. What I saw was 4 large men dressed in all black standing outside of the door. One of them knocked on the door again as the others stood around. I was really surprised by this and didn't know what to do. But obviously, I was not going to open up the door to these guys. Instead, I just kept watching them from the window. After knocking once more, 2 of the men walked away and the other 2 stayed there. Then, one of the men at the front appeared to take out a crowbar. That's when I called the police. I realized that they were likely going to try to break in. I moved away from the window, and at that point, I heard somebody trying to open the back door to my place. I realized that must have been where the other 2 guys went. So when that happened, I feared that some of the men would be able to get in, if not all of them. The police were on the way, but I didn't know if the men would break in before that. I went around the house and found my baseball bat and held it up for protection. Hopefully those guys didn't have guns or anything and I could take them with the bat, although there were 4 of them and 1 of me. I heard the men at the front door as well as the men at the back. After 2 or 3 minutes, they were still not in. I went to the middle of the house, basically as far away from the men as I could get. The sounds of them messing with the doors went on for a while. However, they didn't get in. Soon, the noises stopped altogether. I heard them moving away, and a short time after that, the police arrived. The men must have run away after hearing the police. Unfortunately, they were able to get away. They did some damage to my doors, and probably a few more minutes and they would have gotten in. I'm grateful that the police got there when they did. After that though, I didn't connect the dots between the random message on Facebook from the girl. I thought that the guys just randomly tried to break into my place for some reason. But after that, I remember the next time that I went on Facebook and saw my messages, I noticed that the girl had blocked me. I couldn't even click on her profile anymore. I don't think this was a coincidence. She had asked me where I lived, and I had a picture with some friends out front of my building where you could read the numbers. I think she was somehow involved, and I told police that, and they said they would investigate, but I don't even know if that account was her real name or not. I wish I could remember when exactly we became friends on Facebook and stuff. I'm not sure what the deal was there. I'm just glad that I haven't seen those guys since then.
So this happened a few years ago, but it stuck with me because of how weird and scary it was. So every year for the past few years, my parents have been going on a week-long anniversary trip, leaving me home alone. I was 20, so it was more than an appropriate age. Well, this time around, some weird crap happened the first day that they were gone, and then this happened the night before they were supposed to come home. The first day they were gone, a guy came to the door to drop something off in the morning, but I didn't want to answer it as it was a stranger and I thought he'd just leave it at the door like usual. Well, he stayed for about 5 minutes and then got in his car and started to drive off, to which I then went outside because I thought he had finally left it. This man got out of his car, leaving it in the middle of the road just to give me my package that I didn't have to sign for at all. No signature needed or anything. Wasn't dressed like a delivery person, was in a beat-up car, very weird and uncomfy. Skipping to the end of the week. I was just chilling out in my living room and all of a sudden at 11 at night, I see this rather large figure approach my front door. The glass is dimpled so you can't see the features but just a silhouette. The figure starts banging on my door and then did so for like a minute straight. He just stands there and doesn't leave for probably 10 minutes. And in that time beats on the door a few times over. Luckily, my sister and her family live not even a mile away from me, so I called them and then her husband came to get me. By this time, I'm in full panic mode and I realize that my dogs are in the backyard. My back door is 90% glass, and I was horrified that this person was going to come through the back gate to try and come into my house as my dogs were barking up a storm. Anyways, I got my dogs inside the house and my brother-in-law finally showed up and whoever was there was gone. He takes me to my sister's house and we check the front door cameras to see who was there. The cameras had been turned off the whole time this person was there, and for an hour before that he had started banging on my door. The cameras had been on before that time period and during the time we were looking at the cameras. They were somehow shut off for about an hour and a half. Which was odd because they're not the type that needs to be charged, and they had never glitched before then but were actually very sensitive. To this day, I don't know who it was that showed up at the house. I checked the local news and everything, but nothing ever came of it. I don't know if they were trying to rob my house or if they had other plans, or if it was potentially the delivery guy from earlier that week. But it still freaks me out to think about. And I hate being home alone at night because of it.
This was the first year I'd be spending Christmas alone. I think it sounds sadder than it was, but I couldn't afford the flight back to my hometown and couldn't take off any extra vacation time to make it worth it. Anyway, I always enjoyed seeing others' decorations and driving or walking around on Christmas Day. When I woke up, I turned on the old cartoon Grinch movie and made a nice breakfast and some coffee. Then I spent the next hour on FaceTime with my parents and siblings. After all that, it was probably around noon. I didn't have much else to do, but at some point I went out to get the mail, and when I opened the door, there were footprints in the snow on my porch. What's odd is that they were frozen over, like not freshly made in the powdery top layer of snow. They were clearly made hours ago, like overnight when it was well below freezing. I looked around, even though they clearly were not here anymore, then went out and got my mail. It was very strange. I don't know if I felt scared, but definitely a bit unsettled. I didn't really know what to do about it though. I tried to continue my day without worrying too much. After all, it was Christmas. I had some Hallmark movies play while I opened the gifts and letters that my family had sent in the mail. Around 3, I started getting bored and checked the weather. It was supposed to get a lot colder later in the day, so I decided to go for a walk around the neighborhood while I still had the chance. I bundled up and started down the sidewalk, looking at all the Christmas lights and taking in the calmness. A little bit into the walk, I noticed someone else walking in the neighborhood. They were the only other person I saw, and they were walking on the other side of the road. I thought nothing of it, but a few minutes later, they passed by me again. I did a double take, thinking I was seeing things, because there was no way we could have passed each other twice so soon, unless they turned around right after we passed each other the first time. I kept walking and came up to a split where I could either head back home or keep going around the neighborhood. I ended up going home. It wasn't because of the guy I saw. Sure, it was strange, but something else just felt off and made me want to head back. I went in through the front door, and eerily soon after I got inside, there was a knock at the door. I had only just taken off my boots and was still standing right by the door. My heart pounded in my chest like I knew this was bad. I looked out the peephole and saw a guy standing very close to the door, wearing a baseball cap tilted downward, covering his face. Weirdly, he seemed familiar. I didn't know why. At the moment, I thought it was just because he was the man I'd seen walking around the neighborhood. He knocked again. I knew he had to have already seen me enter. "What do you need?" I called out. They didn't answer. A few seconds later, they banged on the door again. I asked again what they were doing here and what they wanted, and watched out the peephole as he just stood there against the door and refused to answer or speak at all, before banging on the door again. He then grabbed the door handle and started shoving his whole body into it. I backed away as the whole door shook, rattling from its hinges with each blow. It went on for maybe 20 to 30 seconds, then it all suddenly stopped. There was a pause, and then multiple people yelling. When I went over and looked, there were 2 cops outside my home arresting the man at my door. I was completely confused and unsure how this happened. I thought it was just some kind of miracle that they showed up at the perfect time. It turned out a neighbor had actually called the police and reported a man acting unusual, walking back and forth down our street for hours and standing outside my home. Even more disturbing though, I knew the man. He was an old ex from probably 6 years ago. He didn't even live in the same state as me anymore, and we hadn't talked at all since the breakup. It's scary to think that so suddenly, years later, he just decided to show up at my house on Christmas Day and try to break in. The cops found 2 knives on him, and in his car that he parked a few blocks away, he had a firearm and a whole roll of duct tape, both that he purchased just a few days prior. He admitted to nothing, but it's not hard to see what he was likely intending to do. I'd already spent the whole morning and most of the afternoon with family, so now it was just time to go home and wind down for the rest of the night. Maybe watch a holiday movie or something. I drove 45 minutes from my parents' home to mine. The roads were empty, as you could imagine, and if not for it being Christmas, it would have actually been kind of eerie. Everything was so quiet and motionless outside. Anyway, I got home around 8, pulling in the garage and heading inside. I flicked on the entrance light and immediately saw some papers spread across the floor in the hallway. It was all from a stack of mail I had sitting on the counter that I guess had fallen over. I didn't overthink it, I just picked it all back up and tossed it back on the counter. I did leave the house in a rush that morning, so maybe I ran past it and caused the pile to fall, and I just didn't notice. After cleaning it up, I walked around and turned on the rest of the lights, then went into the living room. I had a Christmas tree set up in the corner. It was one of those small fake ones that looked pretty sad, but it was better than nothing. I sat back on the couch and found a movie to watch, some new Netflix Christmas movie. It was actually pretty good. I watched the whole thing, but throughout the whole movie, I kept hearing something in my house. It was like quiet, almost inaudible creaks. I wasn't even sure if I was actually hearing it or not, because every time I'd think I'd heard something, I'd pause the movie and listen, but didn't hear it anymore. I took it as a sign that this Christmas day was over for me, as I needed to get to bed and sleep off the exhaustion of seeing all my family. I turned off the TV and all the lights downstairs and went up to my bedroom, walking in and turning on the overhead lamp. Without hesitation, I knew something wasn't right. I couldn't pinpoint what it was at first, but I knew my room was not how I'd left it. Something had been moved, and I quickly put all the pieces together of everything else I'd been experiencing since getting back home. My body felt numb, both fear and adrenaline taking over me. I walked back out into the hallway and looked down the staircase, trying to listen to see if whoever had been here was still here or not. I quietly went down, step by step, until I reached the bottom. There was no sound or motion at all. "Is anyone here? I've called the cops. Hello?" It was as I was saying that I realized my stupid mistake of not having called the cops yet. I started to go back upstairs, planning to lock myself in my room and call the police, when sudden footsteps rushed from the living room. It was too dark to see anything more than the Christmas tree branches swaying and a figure rushing away from it. I followed the sound into the kitchen and then the back door. They opened it and ran away. I was just standing there, frozen. Once I snapped out of it, I dialed 911 and locked the back door. I still don't really know what happened that Christmas night. Whoever had broken in hadn't taken much of anything, at least nothing that I really noticed. What I think is that they got in just as I was getting home, and once they heard the garage open, they probably sprinted through the kitchen, knocking over the papers, and hid. I know I saw them running away from the tree, but if they were hiding the whole time I was watching the movie, it wouldn't explain the noises I was hearing. Maybe there really weren't any noises, or it was something else entirely. The thought of them being right there in the corner of the room in front of me, waiting and watching me for 2 whole hours, is just horribly disturbing. I wish I had more answers and could tell you more, but that's everything I know. Police weren't of much help, and nothing has happened since. Hopefully, it stays that way.
Back when I was younger, a little reckless, and eager to find love, I thought it'd be a great idea to check out the personal section on Craigslist. Most of the ads I saw were either blatantly fake or downright creepy, but after scrolling for a while, one caught my eye. It was very short and straightforward. Looking for something casual, just broke up with my boyfriend, don't want anything serious, message me if you're interested. Something about it seemed genuine and the attached photo sealed the deal. And this girl was gorgeous, like sort of way out of my league, so I decided that I'd send her a message. She replied almost immediately and things moved fast, really fast, and within a few exchanges she was sending provocative pictures. And I really couldn't believe my luck, but something felt off, like it was way too good to be true. Now, half joking, I sent her a message, "If this is real, send me a picture with my name written on a piece of paper." And to my shock, she did, and that was really all the proof I needed to know that she was real. We kept talking, and she told me that she wasn't looking for anything serious, just a no-strings-attached hookup. Her ex had just moved out, and she wasn't ready for a relationship. She just wanted to have some fun. She then gave me her address and told me to come over. And to make sure everything was legit, I called her, and she answered on the first ring, and her voice was just as alluring as her photos. She said that she was at home, waiting for me. It all felt like a dream that I was going to wake up from at any second, but it wasn't. It was real. When I pulled up to that address, it was a quiet suburban neighborhood. The house looked normal, with a nearly trim lawn and a long driveway. I called her again to let her know that I was there. No answer. I tried again, and still nothing. I started to feel uneasy, but I was convincing myself that I was overthinking. Maybe she was just in the bathroom or had stepped away from her phone. Trying to shake off the nerves, I got out of the car and walked toward the house, and that's when I saw them. 2 men were standing in the window, staring me down as I walked up the driveway. They each looked extremely sketchy, like they'd stepped straight out of a police lineup, and one had a shaved head and a sort of scowl, while the other was very wiry, with tattoos covering his arms. And my blood immediately ran cold. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to get out of there, and without a second thought, I turned and sprinted back to my car. My heart pounded as I jumped in, locked the doors, and just sped off. My hands were shaking, and I couldn't stop glancing in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see them chasing after me. When I finally got home, I tried to calm myself down. Maybe it was a misunderstanding, and maybe those guys had nothing to do with her. But deep down, I knew better. About an hour later, I got a text from the girl. "You're a loser," it read. "That was my boyfriend, and we were just messing with you." I stared at the message, feeling a mix of anger and relief. So much for the ex part, right? And I tried to brush it off as some sick joke, and they probably got a kick out of scaring guys like me. It was messed up, sure, but at least I was okay, I guess. But a few days later, the local news told a much darker story. A man had answered a Craigslist ad in that same neighborhood, and when he showed up, 2 men ambushed him. They beat him, robbed him, and left him barely alive, and he ended up in the hospital fighting for his life. The police said it was a setup, and in the description of the house matched the one that I had been at, and a very cold chill ran down my spine. I couldn't stop thinking about how close I'd come to being their victim. If I hadn't noticed those guys in the window, I might not have made it out, and the thought haunted me for a while. These weren't just pranksters messing around. They were predators, willing to hurt someone for a quick payday. They lured me in with fake promises and a pretty face, and I'd almost fallen for it. Even now I can't shake the memory, the way those men stared at me, unblinking, as if I'd already been caught in their trap, and the relief that I felt when I drove away was replaced by a very sickening realization. I'd been extremely lucky. The man on the news wasn't so fortunate, and I can't help but wonder how many had fallen for that exact same trap.
Many years ago, shortly after I graduated from high school, I worked at a JCPenney store for a while. One time when I was working there, something really strange happened that I don't know how to explain to this day. For a little bit of background information, I'm a female, I was 18 years old at the time, and I lived with my parents and siblings at home. We lived in a pretty typical city in America, and the store that I worked at was in a shopping center about 10 minutes away. I was a part-time employee, and when I worked there, I would usually be a cashier. So one time, I was working a pretty typical shift for me. I started sometime in the afternoon and was getting off at 9 o'clock at night. When it was a little bit later, sometime after 8 p.m., things got really quiet in the store. I was standing behind the counter at the cash register, not really doing anything. I remember that in one of the nearby entrance doors, a woman then walked inside of the store. This woman, from what I remember, had blonde-colored hair and was wearing sunglasses. She walked up to me at the register and then said hi. I said hi to her, and the lady then said that she wanted to return something. I told her that she would have to go to customer service for that, which was at the other side of the store. The woman did not walk away though. Instead, she opened her purse and started to reach inside of it. She took out what just looked like a blue-colored shirt at first. Then she put it on the counter in front of me. I tried to tell her that I couldn't do returns here and she was supposed to go to customer service. She interrupted me though and said, "No, I want to return this." I looked at the shirt and realized that it was an athletic warm-up top for volleyball. And when I looked closer, I realized that it was mine. I played volleyball, and that was my warm-up top that I had got one of the previous seasons in school. It had my number on it and even my last name on it as well. I was so confused when I saw it. I looked back to the woman, and I didn't recognize her. Then she just turned and walked away, leaving the store. When she was leaving, I finally spoke, and I asked her where she had got it from. She did not answer me and just walked out of the doors and then out of my sight. I took my warm-up shirt back and had no idea who that woman was or why she had it. After work that night, I went home and looked through my stuff. Sure enough, I did not have that top, so the one that the woman gave me was my actual one. I still don't know how she got it. I don't remember losing it or forgetting it anywhere. And how would she know where I worked, and why would she bring it to me and act all mysterious? To this day, I never got any answers. This happened 2 years ago at Christmas time. I worked in a pretty large office with a lot of other people. Every year, our department of about 20-something people has a little party with a gift exchange. I remember that a couple of days before the party, I went to the store to get my gift. We all drew names to see what other person we would have to buy a gift for. I drew Amanda, who was a pretty good friend of mine. While I was at the store trying to figure out what to get her, I happened to notice another coworker there. It was a guy named Mike, who, to be honest, always seemed like a pretty strange guy. He didn't really work that close to me and was in another room, but he would work in the same general area. I had heard some things about him over my time working there, and I myself had some awkward conversations with him. So when I noticed him, I really didn't want to go over and say hi, and I didn't think that he noticed me. He was just standing a good distance away and was not looking in my direction when I saw him. So I just finished my shopping and then I left the store. So when the Christmas party arrived, I got there and it was what you would expect for the most part. When it was time for the gift exchange, we all opened the things that we got for each other. The gift that I was receiving came from Mike apparently. What he got for me was a teddy bear with hearts on it. I said thanks and that it was very nice. The rest of the party went on pretty normal. Overall, it was fine, and I went home after that. For the next few days, things went on like normal. But one night, I was at home by myself. I lived alone in a smaller house that I was renting in a neighborhood. I was just having a nice relaxing night to that point. When it got late though, and I was about to go to bed, I happened to glance out of a window. What I saw was what appeared to be a person quickly going behind a bush near my house in the front yard. It happened so fast that I couldn't tell who it was or anything, but obviously this was very suspicious. I was now nervous to go to bed, thinking that somebody might be prowling around or trying to break in. I went and made sure that every door was locked and every window was closed, which they were. When I moved to the back of the house to check there, I heard somebody try opening the front door. That's what really got me nervous. At that point, I went over to my phone ready to call the police. Then I went to another window and I looked, but nobody was at the door any longer. Whoever it was must have moved. I wasn't sure if they had left or not, so I just kind of stayed there at the front window looking around. I didn't see anything for probably several minutes. Then I saw somebody come out from behind my car in the driveway. It was a man and he was walking closer to the house. Then I realized that it was Mike. When I saw him, I quickly moved away from the window. I couldn't believe that he was at my house. I had no idea how he would even know where I lived. Moments later, he tried the front door again. Now I decided to call the police. I dialed 911 and then went into my bedroom where I felt safer. When I was in there, I heard a loud bang at the other end of the house. I feared that Mike may have been trying to break in. I didn't know why, but he had always kind of given me the creeps. I stayed in my bedroom for the next few minutes. The police got there very fast. The next thing I knew, I heard police and I looked out of my bedroom window and I saw several police vehicles outside. Mike was arrested for attempting to break into my house. With a further investigation, I found out that Mike did not originally have me for the gift exchange. When he found out who did, he traded with them, saying that he had the perfect idea for me. And inside the teddy bear was an AirTag, which is how he knew my location. This information really freaked me out, but I was also very glad that he had been caught. I don't go on Facebook that much, but I do go on from time to time, and last year something really strange happened. One day I went on Facebook for the first time in probably a couple of weeks. When I did, I saw that I had one new friend request and clicked on it to see who it was. The person appeared to have the same exact profile as me. They had the same name as me and the same profile picture. It was like they were pretending to be me. I clicked on the profile, assuming it to probably be a bot, but this was really strange. There was not a whole lot that I could see right away on the page, so I accepted the friend request to see more. After I did, I saw that this person pretending to be me had posted several of the same pictures that I had on my page, but this profile only had one friend, which was now me. I was still thinking that it was a bot of some sort, and this was really weird. I sent a message to the person saying, "What's the meaning of this?" They responded back rather quickly, saying exactly what I had said to them. "What's the meaning of this?" I asked who it was, and they wrote back the same thing, just imitating what I said. It was really weird. I figured at this point that it was probably some kind of a prank. I got off of Facebook and texted a few of my friends about it. However, when I did, none of my friends admitted to it and didn't seem to know what was going on. I know my friends pretty well, and they all seemed genuinely confused. The next day, I was really curious as to who it was, so I went back on and sent another message to the page. This time, hoping that it was a joke somebody was playing on me for some reason, I said, "This is a funny joke, but seriously, who are you?" The page responded just saying, "This is not a joke." They finally said something other than just what I had said to them. I asked them to stop pretending to be me, saying that it was really weird. They responded saying, "Okay, I will just take your account then." I didn't know what they meant by this, but I was annoyed and I blocked the page right then and there. I thought that was that. The next day, however, I got a Facebook notification randomly saying that several people had liked my photo. I hadn't posted anything lately, so I went on to see. That's when I realized that my account had been hacked. There was a picture posted to my account. It was my profile picture, but put through several filters and it looked really weird. Whoever was behind this said they would hack my account, and they did. I really couldn't believe it. I quickly deleted the post and then changed my password. I hadn't told my previous password to anyone, so I don't know how they would have even known it. After that, I didn't go on Facebook for a long time, and also strangely, the person never hacked into my account again or sent me another friend request or message. I still don't know who did that or why. It's very mysterious.